Greetings. Peace be to everybody. This your girl Tiffany here, live in effect, and I am a little bit behind on schedule. So today I want to do a part two about the subject dealing with ADHD and autism and mental health. And I have someone who is a certified psychology major. Okay, she has worked with the school board and she has worked with children who have certain type of disease such as autism and ADHD. So she's gonna come in here and we're gonna have a conversation regarding to what is ADHD, what is autism, and what is her thought on Chrisette Michelle. So I'm gonna introduce you guys to the sister. Her name is Iya Jennifer. All right. So we're gonna have a great dialogue here. Hey, peace. How you doing?
Peace, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Could you hear me?
Rip, yep, I can hear you.
Perfect. Perfect. All right then. So I'm so glad to have you here. This is going to be a great conversation. So what I want to do is I want to get into the question. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So if you could tell me more about yourself first and foremost, just tell me a little bit more about your background so people will know.
Okay. All right. So, you are correct. I'm a certified school psychologist. So I've been working as a school psychologist for at least 20, well, almost 20 years. I have been mostly working in the school settings. I've also worked in group homes and different programs that are like outside of the K-12, mainstream general education setting. I've worked in specialized schools, like special education schools that um, focus on certain disabilities, mainly specific learning disability and emotionally disturbed individuals. I have a lot of experience, but I also have a lot of experience working with people or using the skills that I have as a school psychologist, using them with people who don't have mental health disorders and things like that that impact their learning. A school psychologist is a psychologist that basically does just what that is working with individuals in the school, be it the teachers and the students, to make learning more easier for them by giving them specialized supports, giving them different plans that can help them to kind of focus on what it is that they're there to do, which is to learn. So, yeah. I said I've been doing this for 20 years. Yeah, so I've been an educator for a very long time. A very long time. Right now, I work for myself. I worked for the school district or the school system for most of my career, but in 2017, I left to start my own practice, and so that's what I'm doing.
Okay. And what's the name of your practice again?
The name of the practice is JCTC, which is Jennifer Celesta Training and Consulting. But I also have a nonprofit organization called Regeneration 180. People are probably more familiar with that, and that's not necessarily has to do with me being a school psychologist, but kind of. I started my own school, different programs that are African centered. So that's where I spend or put most of my energy into is the Regeneration 180.
Okay. Wow.
Mhm.
That's great. That's really great. All right. So the first question I have is, what is autism?
Okay, so before we get into the different autism and ADHD, I want to first explain what the DSM is. Some people know what it is, some people don't.
Okay.
The DSM is, excuse me, the DSM is a book that's used for with trained professionals. So you can be a doctor and use the DSM, a clinician, and it helps us to identify and describe mental health conditions. So this book has had several editions since its first one in 1952. and we're on the 5th edition. So it helps us to describe and diagnose a person, what best fits their experiences and behaviors. So when you look up a disorder in the DSM, this is a DSM, this is like a mini one right here. When you look
Okay.
up a disorder in the DSM, it's broken down into each of the diagnosis, or the different disorders are broken down into categories. So usually there's 3 categories: A being symptoms, B being the duration, and C being impact. So in order for us to make a diagnosis, a person has to meet a certain number of these criteria that are outlined in this manual. Um, so first explanation. So,
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, go
So
ahead.
I meant to ask you, what does
Mhm.
DSM stand for?
So it stands for the diagnostic, um, the diagnostic statistical manual.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So sometimes these disorders in the book, they either change names, or some have been taken out completely. Like I often tell people that until like the 1960s, um, homosexuality was considered uh, a disorder.
I remember
So.
hearing about that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
remember hearing about that.
Yeah. So some things, they change criteria and how things look and how they're described based on just certain phenomena in society, or, further research explaining things a little bit better. So, things are kind of thrown in and throughout. They don't do it very haphazardly. They generally have, sufficient amount of data in order to change things. Um, and so, like I said, this has been a manual since the 50s, the early 50s. So, a lot of things have run in and out of here. So, um, yeah, that's
Okay.
the DS. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can get back to the question.
Yes.
What
What is
is
autism?
autism? Hmm.
Yeah. What is autism?
So, according to the DSM, autism, what, let me just say, in the DSM, it doesn't say autism anymore. Okay. It did before. There was autism disorder, or autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder. So all of these were part of the spectrum. So now what it's called is the autism spectrum disorder. So we don't no longer um, categorize it, or put a different name on it based on the level of what it is. All of these are on a spectrum. So it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that is characterized by 2 things: uh, social communication skills or deficits, and the second one is restrictive and repetitive type behaviors and interests. So in the 5th edition of the DSM, like I said, autism was no longer its separate category. All of these things, with Asperger's syndrome, uh, autistic disorder, uh, pervasive developmental disorder, all of these are now aligned on a spectrum. Okay. So there's level 1 autism, level 2 autism, I'm sorry, level 1 ASD, and I'm gonna now call it ASD. So autism spectrum disorder. Level 1 ASD, 2 and 3. All right, so there's 3 levels of ASD. We used to say severe, mild, and moderate, but we no longer use those terms. Now we might use those terms when we're talking and communicating with the person who's, has this disorder, or their parents. But as far as like in the paperwork and all of that, um, you'd have ASD 1, level 1, ASD level 2 or 3. Okay, so like I said, now it's on the spectrum because in every instance, ASD doesn't look the same. Okay, so you have ASD that looks like, well, level 1, which the person may be very intelligent, very verbal. Okay, they're good. good communicator, but their social, their social is off. So that impacts their um, ability to, maintain relationships, or maybe maintain the things or the skills needed to have positive relationships. Okay. And that used to be called Asperger's, so somebody might say, well, my son has Asperger's, he's super smart. So that's like your young Sheldon. I don't know if you've seen that show before, things like that, like um, that children are able to express themselves, but there's quirks about them that impact them that heavy, that it disrupts their ability to function. And then you have like a level 3 ASD. So the level 3, that's severe autism. So level 3, um, children may have difficulty um, in throughout development, being able to feed themselves or communicate with others. I mean, it is a stark difference between what you would see a level 3 and a level 1 do. But with all of these, at all levels, 1, 2, and 3, the primary thing is that it impacts their social communication, and it also restricts their behaviors, or they repeat certain things, or they have quirky interests. Okay, so that's what ASD is.
So, okay, I want to be able to get a better understanding. So,
Okay.
the first level of autism is not as severe, right? So, it's just basically you're intelligent. You can talk or whatnot, you can do for yourself, but you're just not able to develop a great social skill set.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and
Exactly.
level 2 is
Level 2 is somewhere in between these two extremes. So level three sometimes might even look like an intellectual disorder, which is the new way to say mental retardation. So
right.
it looks very similar to that, and some people who have level 3 also have been diagnosed with intellectually disability, or intellectually disabled. So they definitely look different, and they're definitely um, involve different things. But yeah, like you were what you were saying, a level 1 ASD, they might score superior on an IQ test, but level 3, they wouldn't be able to even really sit to do something like that, maybe to even be able to be tested. Um, their language development may not even be as developed as one needs it to be in order to do one of those tests. So they may be not necessarily, I wouldn't say untestable, but it would not be easy for them to be in a situation where they could sit and do something like that.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
wow,
Mhm.
wow, wow. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. That's something I would have to study more into because I didn't know there was
Mhm.
3 levels to it. So
Yeah.
now let's go into talk about ADHD. What is
Okay.
ADHD?
Okay. So ADHD is also a neurodevelopment disorder, but it is characterized by, like the name suggests, inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. So these things interfere with their functioning or development. So ADHD is a more common diagnosis that we hear of, especially in mainstream schools. Um, there's a special education law called IDEA or IDEA. It does not list ADHD as its own separate disability category in an educational setting. It's actually underneath a disability called uh, other health impaired. Okay, so other health impaired are um, any diagnosis that you have that kind of weakens your ability to stay focused in a situation. So this could even be like this could even be like a medical diagnosis that you got from a doctor, but it still is impacting you that much that can't function or focus in school, and that this OHI category is what would be on your IEP for you to get services. So that's different from kind of with autism spectrum disorder. They have their own category. So the categories are like LD, you have learning disabled, and you have intellectual disabled, and TBI. All of these things are, TBI is traumatic brain injury. You've got emotionally disturbed. That could range from anything from someone having depression and an anxiety disorder, anything that impacts their emotions. So getting back to ADHD, even though we know a lot about it, and it's as far as like the mainstream, like people who aren't professionals, like even though y'all know a lot about it, all kids who have ADHD aren't necessarily they're not necessarily in special education, because you can have a student who has ADHD and they don't have an IEP, they don't have any specialized services, or they might have some specialized things that a teacher does for them, like give them extra time on tests because they get distracted a bit. So we'll give them 30 extra minutes on all their tests, or they get fidgety in class. So they might have something called a flash pass that they give the teacher and be like, okay, I need a break, and kind of quietly do their thing in the hallway and come back. So there's a lot of things that we can do for kids who have ADHD in the mainstream classroom, that they don't necessarily have to go to special ed. They don't have to have something so restrictive. We call it the least restrictive environment. We want to make sure that individuals are taught in their least restrictive environment. So if they don't need a IEP, if it's not impacting them that much, then we're not going to give them specialized services as in the IEP. So ADHD is a disorder of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and these things interfere with their functioning or development.
Okay, so wow. So now the third question, I think you kind of answer it, but
Okay.
if you can answer it again, how is autism and ADHD similar and different from each other? So let's look at the similarity between autism and ADHD first.
Okay. So similarities, number one, they're both neurodevelopmental disorders. So this basically means that they affect brain development in some kind of way. And this effect can start in neuro, but then it could continue into like the age of 24, 25, because our brains aren't fully developed until then. So during this time, that's why sometimes people are not diagnosed with something until like later on in life, because the signs were never there, or signs weren't as clear, because the brain is still developing when you're a child. And so, that's why we can do certain things in certain developmental stages. So for number one, they're both neurodevelopmental disorders. Number two, according to this organization called CHAD, which is like they're the leading United States organization for everything ADHD. So ADHD research, ADHD resources. So according to them, more than half of people who have been diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, also have signs of ADHD. So ADHD is the most common coexisting condition in children and adults with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. Um, and then lastly, they are quite similar because they affect the part of the brain, the executive functioning part of the brain. So this part of our brain helps us with decision making and staying focused and managing our time and controlling our impulses. So both of these disorders impact that part of our brain.
So to basically kind of just sum it up, right? They both have an impact on the cognitive function, correct?
Correct. Yep. Hmm.
Okay, okay. Wow. Now, let's get into the differences. I know you were talking about the differences, but if you can just elaborate on the differences again.
Okay. So they're different. Number one, because ASD, ASD is it's impacting social communication deficits, and not necessarily as opposed to like ADHD. Yes, not necessarily social communication is impacted, but social skills are impacted. So and and I think that that's more of a kind of like a byproduct of what ADHD is, because look, okay, so for example, if a person is extra hyper, everybody may not want to be all around that, what I'm saying, like they can't turn themselves off in certain situations. So because of that, that impacts their social life. Okay. So they're different in that way. One, autism spectrum, they're not able to do certain things. So they have to learn how to do those things. For example, eye contact is a big one that can be all throughout the spectrum. Um, Being able to focus on like empathy, being able to like connect with somebody else. That's very hard for people with the spectrum disorder, and yeah, things like that. Um, as far as like repetitive behaviors, they repeat things because it's either comforting to them, it soothes them. There's a reason why, they might tap, 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 or like, pick at, their arm, or like chew on their hands or something like that. Something about that, something uh, about that is comforting to them. An individual with like ADHD, they don't necessarily deal with those types of things. They just deal with kind of like the aftermath of their hyperactivity. So that might be not necessarily not having positive relationships with their teacher, but because the teacher has to put so much effort into telling Johnny to sit down, every whatever, that might be something that's impacting their relationship with each other. So yeah, I would say that the issues that they have socially is kind of like a manifestation of their disability. It's not necessarily highlight of their disability. People with ADHD can, form healthy relationships. They can do all of that. But I guess I'm just trying to say that because of their behavior, some of these things might be a little bit difficult or weaker based on circumstances of that environment.
Wow. And I want to tell you something. So it was a video that I saw on Instagram. It was a
Hmm.
teacher. I guess they had an interview or something. So the teacher came out the classroom and she posted up a picture of what the one of the students made, right?
Hmm.
And the student had put up a picture of, drew a picture or made a picture of a middle finger.
Oh.
So, so the lady asked, well, what did the student tell you? She said, F you. But she put it in she made the picture because I guess one of her
Hmm.
students can't talk. So maybe that person has ADHD or autism. I don't know which one it
Okay.
is. But
Uh-huh.
they have some type of one of the students has some type of disability, and I guess she told the student to do the assignment,
Uh-huh.
and she did not want to do the assignment. She got upset, so she made the picture and she put the middle finger on it. I just thought because when you as you were laying there and you were saying it, I was thinking about the video. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
it was just
Wow.
pretty funny how she just started laughing and everything. She's like, just because they can't talk doesn't mean they can't express themselves.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
And that
But
was probably that yeah, that was probably someone with the on the spectrum, ASD. Because they often, they often can't, well, they often don't develop um their speech is delayed. Their speech is delayed and then underdeveloped as as a older child or sometimes as an adult. So
so the next question is, how important is it to learn about mental health?
so so it's very important. Obviously, I would say that very important because mental health is not just about some. When people think of mental health, the majority of people think of disabilities and things like that, maybe depression, anxiety, those that are more common but aren't impactful, not impactful in society, but like more not as uh the more popular ones that we talk about. Then it also ranges, to things like intellectually disabled and like autism as well. But mental health is more than just diagnosis and disabilities. Um, it's important for us to promote the overall well-being of a person. So mental health is just 1/3 of the whole triad of well-being. So just like we take care of our physical self, we need to do the same thing for our spiritual self. That's the second one, and our mental health as well. So that's the third one. Um, and so the more that we take care of ourselves, our mental well-being, the more we can just, function in society as, fully functioning people that are able to like attend to their own needs and, manage their own thoughts and feelings and all of that. Um, so, number one, the overall well-being of everybody, but then also, understanding mental health also helps us to improve our relationships. It helps us to correct our misunderstandings, our misinformation about our behavior, about somebody else's behavior. Um, it might, it does help us to improve our life skills. So, our ability to manage stress, handle ourselves, make wise choices for ourselves. So it's important for us to understand and learn about mental health because there's a lot of misconceptions about mental health. But I truly believe that the healthier that we all are as individuals, the stronger we'll be as community and society. So definitely just as important as all other, you know, facets of health.
That's great. I'm glad that you broke that down because yeah, it is that important, very vital. Now, I was gonna ask the next question, what are the causes and effects of both autism and ADHD, but you pretty much went into that. You explained the neurological development and pretty much how it impacts social skills and whatnot. So you pretty much answered that question. Um, so the next question, I'm gonna go ahead and skip to the next one. Is autism or ADHD pretty common within the Black community?
So when we talk about what's common, I mean, anything that we talk about how common it has to be, we're really just talking about how often it's diagnosed. So if a person is experiencing something, but they don't actually have a recognized diagnosis, then we can't really count that in the commonality of it. But because there's a lot of people who have stuff that they haven't been diagnosed with something, you know. So statistically, that could kind of be tricky, because it only reflects what we've officially recorded, what's been actually recorded and documented, and not necessarily what's truly happening. Um, so, with that being said, like for example, let me start. Well, let me start with ADHD. ADHD, ADHD is often over assumed in Black children, especially with boys, due to the bias, the behavior bias, or the stereotype biases in schools. Um, that's how we land on some of the information that has been shared by like Dr. Umar, Dr. Naeem Akbar, the late Dr. Jawanza Kanjufu. They've all written about that particular subject. So the overassumption is real that our boys have ADHD, or then a lot of them have ADHD, but the actual statement that that we're overly diagnosed is not necessarily true. Okay. Black individuals are less likely to receive proper diagnosis, um, and treatment, and services, and all of that. And all of that because of either the school district that they're in, they don't have as many resources, or like doctors don't necessarily specialize in these things. Well, most of them do ADHD. They pretty much have great training on, physicians have great training on how to diagnose that. What I'm saying is sometimes it's all about like the resources that are provided to us based on where we live, right? As far as ASD, autism spectrum disorder, so autism spectrum disorder, um, I won't say it's common necessarily, but the rates of diagnosing Black children, ASD in Black children, are now just as high as the rates of diagnosis in white children. So for a while, that was uh, it, it the difference between the two, it was based on access to resources, access, to support. They might get a delay in support because, their parent may not have known how to recognize, what to look for, or, put things together. They just may not have understood what it looked like. So when we have more, better awareness and an ability to kind of understand what to look for, if we think that something might be off, then we can, be more responsive to it. Then that's another thing, making sure that there's culturally responsive care and resources in different cities, that'll help us to kind of, understand understand ASD a little bit more, and actually provide resources for parents and families. So commonality, I can't really speak to common, but um, autism is now, it's more recognizable now that, especially since we have social media and people are talking about these different things. um, I think now more of our children have been diagnosed, or have has seen a professional based on, their experiences and their behaviors. Yeah, and ADHD has always kind of been out there floating around. So
All right, you kind of like answered the other part of the question. So is there history of these neurological developments taking place within our community? And what I mean, like, does these things have to do with like the epigenetic, or does it go back into like what when I mean by epigenetic, mean like okay, what our ancestors had to endure in this society from like studies going back to slavery, going back to Jim Crow, Reconstruction era, those time periods and what they had to go through and how it affect their neurological development, right?
mhm.
Do you think that those things have made an impact to where it's starting to show more within us as far as like, how we function in society.
Mhm.
I hope I'm making sense with the questions.
Yeah. So I think that environmental factors have a lot to do with both of these, um, because because our brains don't fully develop until the age of 25. There's a lot of things that we deal with now or experience now than that our ancestors didn't necessarily have to experience. They didn't even know anything about it. It wasn't even a thing. So I think that environmentally, um, the impact of certain things kind of trigger certain behaviors in the brain, and now shows up. So it didn't necessarily show up back then because certain things weren't a thing, but now that certain things are a thing and we see it, we do those things, and like we experience those things. Um now it's something, now it's called something that we can now define, you know a certain response to that environmental thing. um, to my knowledge, there's very little formal research documented with these two neurological conditions in our communities. Of course, most research that has been done on everything or all of these diagnoses, um, they included the white, middle class, upper class populations. So we don't have a historic record of what these diagnostics look like. We don't really have that. We kind of, unfortunately, depend on the Eurocentric, you know. Um, or the European or the Western European
The Western
picture of what
European
that looks
psychology.
right,
Okay.
exactly, right. Because we weren't necessarily considered anything until a certain point in the society. So and we know that depending on where your ancestors came from, we are different. I mean, of course, we are the human race, but based on our origins, um, we have different functionings. I mean, Dr. Amos Wilson talks about that a lot. So we're not necessarily like we're not carbon copies of, or like literal carbon copies of white people. We have our own. We have our own wiring, and that's just all throughout our nervous system, all throughout our brain. Um, so yeah, there's
Oh,
different things that we have experienced now that we didn't experience, back then, and that kind of I guess that changes the way that we respond to things.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So maybe basically it's not enough studies showing that there was a connection between what was taking place during that time period and how it can play a factor in the neurological development. Basically, that's what you're saying. It's not enough studies on it, right?
Yeah, I don't know of any myself, but I'm pretty. I mean, if somebody was smart, they would try to look for something like that. But as far as I know, there's little at all, if any, research on that.
Okay. Now let's go back to the statement that you made that there is more studies on African Americans or on Black kids as far as autism spectrum is concerned, as opposed to white children, right? Why do you think that is?
More studies? No, what I was saying was no. What I was saying was
Or was
that
it like more diagnosis research? I know you were saying something, right?
yeah, no, I was saying that now we're at the point where the diagnosis for white children and Black children are like at the same level. It used to be that we were diagnosed, diag underdiagnosed, or not diagnosed at all. So it's something, things that we didn't understand. So yeah, I think that has more to do with like the research. I mean, not the research, the resources that we have in our communities. There was a lack of resources, but I think that that's changed since.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So you see, the next question, you pretty much tackled this question. I was going to ask, how can the Black community be better educated on both autism and ADHD? And the reason why I throw that question is out there because a lot of us are very ignorant when it comes to understand these neurological development, and we kind of just, well, there are those who would just treat people as if they're outcasts because of the lack of understanding they have.
Hmm.
Like those who, let's say you grew up in a family, right? And you probably the only one out of all your siblings that has autism or ADHD. And
Hmm.
they kind of just treat you as if you are inferior, or they infantilize you,
Hmm.
basically, right?
Yeah.
They don't really pay you any attention. They don't say much to you. They just kind of push you off to the side, and then the rest of the family member does the same thing. And then
Hmm.
you kind of feel like you're an outcast because you
Hmm.
can't really express yourself. You can't really articulate that. Well, hey, I feel like I don't belong in this family because you don't fully understand what's going on. You don't really know what to say. So
Yeah.
how can the Black community, and I'm telling you this because I done seen it happen. How can the Black
Hmm.
community be better educated on that level so they can be able to give more special attention to the loved ones they have in the family?
Hmm. So I think that number one, we need to, because we know that these things can happen, we need to have more education with parents in particular. Because the parent will be the person, they should be the guardian of the child. And so, in being the guardian, we have to protect, we have to, number one, of course, be aware of what's going on, but also protect our child from, certain encounters in their environment, so that, something like being at a family reunion and being isolated because of, how they're acting or what it looks like they're doing. So they're able to better cope with it. The person who's being outcasted is better to cope with it. But then also we need to teach um, teach to the skill deficits also. So if there's some missing skills that makes them more different, um, more different, that they are now kind of isolated in a particular environment because of how they behave, teaching them those skills, to try to compensate for the lack of, being able to do it easy. Um, so parental education is one. But then I think that all schools, um, regardless of what kind of school, they should teach children of how brains work and how they work differently. Because it's not just, all of these conditions or disorders have to do with the brain. And so I believe that psychology should be taught in, mainstream education, because it's like understanding psychology can help you understand yourself, but it also can help you to understand the person sitting next to you. So it's important for us to do that because we live in a diverse society, not necessarily just the skin color, but diverse, we have diverse skills and diverse, ways of thinking and all of that. So just learning and of course the Black community in particular, but just any community, just understanding psychology is really important. So I think that should be a required thing.
So now speaking of psychology, but I totally agree with you. Do you think that it should be like a required curriculum, especially in high school?
Yes, I do. Because I remember in high school, I remember taking psychology, but it was just like it was an elective class. Like you didn't have to do it. You know, you could pick something else. But I think that it should be required because um, it's just so important to a person. Like everyone needs to, learn how to function in society, and why not offer, a kind of like a umbrella class that would, it involves you, it involves society, it involves other people and relationships and all that. So definitely, I think it definitely should be required.
And yeah, I think so too because it's a head start to, get the understanding of what it's like to deal with those who have
Hmm.
different behavior functions than you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So when you go into like university or if you go into the workforce, you kind of get a general idea. You already kind of know what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. No, I mean, no matter what, like, even if you're like working for yourself or like you go to trade school, we're dealing with people, we're dealing and we're in situations where we have to manage ourselves. So psychology is all of that.
So my next question is there any book recommendation about these subjects? Now I know you posted a book earlier, but do you have any other book recommendation that touches on more about the subject dealing with autism, ADHD, or just mental health in general?
Okay. So my first book recommendation um, that incorporates, I think both of those is The Learning Styles of African American Children by Dr. Juwanza Kunjufu. Um, but that book also, it touches on everything from ADHD to specific learning disability. Um, so that's a guide for, I think it's literally called A Guide for Educators and Parents. So
What's the
that's
name of the book?
the learning styles of African American children.
Okay.
Mhm. Um, Another book that I recommend to some of my clients is called Uniquely Human by Barry Prizant, Prizant. That's a white dude. Um, that book,
Very
Barry, Barry, um, Prizant, Prizant. That book focuses on the spectrum, so understanding ASD. And then another book that has been out for a while that I've recommended to people a lot is The Explosive Child. So, The Explosive Child by Ross Green, Green with an E. So that book is a book on neurodevelopmental disorders. So everything from ADHD to ASD. Um, and so that helps. I recommend that book because the stories in it and the information in it helps parents to deal with early diagnosis, or you know what kind of things could they do to modify in their house to you know kind of help their child with dealing with certain behaviors because they manifest in different ways. So I would say that those are my three recommendations for these two disorders in particular.
mm, okay, okay, that's wow. I'm gonna have to check those books out.
Hmm.
Because most of the books that I have deals with psychology itself, or
Okay.
psychology, or either philosophy and
Hmm.
science, and of course history along with that. But yeah, I love psychology, so that's like one of my top favorite subjects. When I was in school, I was going to school for sociology. And if
Okay.
you're gonna learn sociology, of course you're gonna have to learn psychology and
Right.
philosophy. It's like,
Hmm.
it's in the
Yeah.
subject. So
Right.
but yeah, I try to like study more on psychology just because, you know, I have to really get a better, now that I'm older, it's about gaining better understanding about how people function
Mhm.
in the world, and how culture can have an impact on our behavior and how we view things and how we view each other. So
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would be looking into those books.
Okay.
Um, let me see. Let's talk about Chris and Michelle. So
Okay.
you had your views about Miss Chris. Um, Now in her podcast, she mentioned that she is struggling with mental health issues.
Yeah.
So one of those issues was autism and ADHD, and she also mentioned that she had type 2 bipolar, which that
Okay.
is something, saying that was kind of fairly new to me because I didn't know there was different level of bipolar either, but she mentioned about that. So what are your thoughts as far as her condition is concerned?
So, I didn't hear about the ADHD until later. I mean, so all of these are fine. Okay. I'm not saying that okay. Let me get to my gripe with this. All right. So I don't know anything about her history, to say what she does or does not have, or in terms of like her mental health status. Um, Hearing that she has two, bipolar two, the difference between one and two, bipolar two is hypomania. So this is like mania is type one, so they would be like a manic person, bipolar two is hypomania is a less intense, shorter lasting form of mania. So they're not manic for an extended period of time. It doesn't impact them as severely as type one. Okay, so I mean, again, I don't know her. I'm not interacting with her or observe her to know if she does or not. So that's fine. Have bipolar too. But as far as her ADHD, I mean, I can see that because people, have ADHD and are able to function with it, or deal with it or whatever. But the gripe I had was her using the word severe to describe her autism. So, so let's go back to the levels, right? So
Right.
level
Based on
one,
what her doctor told her. She was
oh,
going by what
based on what her doctor told.
yeah.
Okay, and so, and so, I, based on what her doctor told her, if her doctor told her the word severe, I'm a little skeptical of the doctor. I have to say that because if you're using the word severe with your patient or your client, you have to be real careful with that, because if we're saying severe autism, or impacts me severely, I don't know which one she said. Did she say it impacts me severely, or did she say she had severe autism? It doesn't matter. The word severe is in there. So when we talk about severe, we're looking at like a level 3, and she's definitely not a level 3. I mean, she could be somewhere on the spectrum. I'm not going to say that she's not. She could be a 2, she could be a 1. I don't know, her IQ score or anything like that. But what I'm saying is the word severe. Um, Sometimes we can look at a person with level 3 autism and recognize it already. We can look at them and say there's something different about that person just by laying eyes on them. They don't have to do anything for us to kind of see it. It kind of has a look to it, I'll say, like, so so just hearing, her describe it, or using the word severe, when I think of severe, I'm thinking more low functioning, and she definitely can function. She has a career. People on level 3 sometimes can't even uh, survive in a career setting, or they have to have something that's a very repetitive type um, job, like working at the groceries, like Kroger, and like being the cart person, things like that. And I know Chrisette Michelle can do more than that. So it was just the word, severe in there that kind of, wrinkled up my panties. But if she if she says she has autism, then I'm okay with that. I who am I to judge? But I just the word severe was I was just like, come on now. That's where it was kind of to me. So
Okay, okay,
yeah.
okay, yeah. And maybe she might been describing the level two autism as being
Hmm.
severe, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
Very possibly, yeah.
yeah, it could be a
Hmm.
possibility of that. But okay, now because basically the word severe is like um it's what pretty much extreme in that sense.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you personally, right? Let me get to the
Hmm.
question on here. Hold on. The question is on my phone. Got my screen locked on here. Here we go. So I want to ask you, as somebody who's a psychologist working in the school, what is it like working with people who have autism, ADHD, or both? Like, what was your experience?
So I will say that I've worked with more children who have ADHD than autism. So let me first break down my work with kids with autism. Um, when I was in graduate school, so I live in the DC area, so there's a lot of for good reason. There's a lot of different organizations around here that are strong resources, like research-based resources and facilities for people and children with autism spectrum disorder. So I've had the opportunity to work in these facilities, not necessarily as a professional, but like as an aide, like helping them to either be their scribe in class, or like help them learn certain deficit school skills, um, like helping them to learn how to eat and things like that, because again, it's on the spectrum. So the more severe your uh, your disability is, the more likely you'll be in like a facility, like a special school to address your autism. So, and I found that to be fun because I was younger. And also like going to graduate school, I like the learning on hand, the on hand, what is it, the on site learning. Like I was able to like put what I was learning in class, to good use at work. But then there's also like specialized certifications, like ABA therapists, who do more close work with people with autism. So I had a good time. It's a very unpredictable environment working with kids with ASD. As far as working with kids with ADHD, that's more of my background. Well, between the two, um, and that's also enjoyable as well. But sometimes the ADHD uh, can. No, I've had experiences where ADHD has impacted um, a student so much that it kind of sours them, as an individual, because they feel the response of the environment around them. So sometimes they can get like angry or things like that. So it looks different. So like when they do all that and doing so much, I don't like it. But they have great, for the most part. Um, I mean, it's just like working with any other student. Um, and so I've had kids that have ADHD who have been like very creative, and they are um, someone that are at the top of their class, and they have shown me. Um, you can say it from a book all you want to, but they have shown me that a disability does not have to like cripple you for the rest of your life, or a diagnosis doesn't have to do that either. it just, as you are aware of these things, there's, certain things that you need to learn to compensate for, how your brain is wired. So yeah, I enjoy working with, of course, well, let me not say all, most kids. Um, so, kids with ADHD or ASD, they're no different from them, like the enjoyment part of it. But of course, there's definitely differences. So,
Wow. Wow, that's a great experience. Now, I want to ask you this. Let's deal with the scientific level because a lot of people don't know psychology is a form of science.
of course.
It is,
Hmm.
and psychologists are scientists. They just not somebody that's in the laboratory,
Right.
abstracting DNA and stuff like that. All right. Did you ever have to conduct a research with somebody like yourself that has a master's degree? Have
Hmm.
you ever conducted a research
Hmm. Of
and have
course.
you had to write a paper?
Hmm.
And what type of research method did you have to use, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, depending on the study. So, like for my thesis, I did an experimental study, the effects of gender-based education. So I had to go to, I literally had to go to a school in Philadelphia to get some data um, from their students. So like collecting data to compare to, and this was a specialized all-girls school. I had to compare that information from the data that I collected at a co-ed school. So definitely using like the experimental research design. Um, yeah, we as school psychologists or psychologists in general, we definitely participate in the development of, the resources, the research, all of that. Because if we weren't active, if we didn't do, that's definitely part of a school psychologist's job. Because if we weren't able to interpret data, then we couldn't do what we do. That's a major part of being a school psychologist is working with data, understanding data, being able to read the data, so that you can use this data to actually, put it to good use and, either create an intervention at the school or design a plan for this student or that student. So definitely important to understand science. That's our that's our basic, that's like a basic thing that we all have to kind of get into. In
So
order
how
for in order for me to even get my master's, I had to do I had to do a thesis. So um,
how often did you have to get involved in doing research?
so, like, you mean as a student
Like
or
just
just
as a student or
in my
just somebody as a person who holds a degree, who holds a master's degree,
mhm,
how often was it required for you to go and do research? Like did you have to do it every 3 months, every 6 months, or
mhm.
how did it work?
Well, so that's a good question because like that depends on where you work. So like so now outside of school, we're talking about like postgraduate stuff. Um, Now it all depends on what your interest is. So like I have a high interest in research. And because I work for myself, research is very important because I have to design programs that are, that have been researched, proven that these types of things work or this specific tests work. So I couldn't do what I'm doing without, having an interest or doing research on a continuous basis. Like for example, if a person who works for the school district, they don't necessarily have to have data output. Most of their work is you're in a school. This is our protocol. This is what I want you to do as a school psychologist. So this is what you're doing. So there's not as much flexibility, or their schools are not necessarily concerned about you, outputting research. But then, as opposed to a person who works on the collegiate level, like that's definitely something that they have to do, on a continuous basis. So it really depends on um, where you're working, or like, what you want to put your energy into. But that's definitely why I wanted to leave the school system, is because I wanted to do my own research. I wanted to develop programs based on research, um, and how I'm just interested in, of course, definitely interested in our people first. And so I think my time and energy here on earth is better served if I'm doing things that have to do with strengthening our, level of, like, self-awareness and, you know, independence from, like, the Western whatevers, so, Black psychology or African centered psychology is
I was
more,
getting ready to touch on
yeah.
that question. I was going to
Mhm.
ask. I didn't mean to cut you off, but now let's look at the difference. Before I get to that question, how long
Mhm.
did it take for you to write a paper on whatever you know your research was? Like, how long did it take?
Um, it took me like a published one, like a
Yeah,
published
a
paper.
published one. If you had, just say a published one. If you had to do
It
a
was
published.
like maybe 9 months. Well, to write it, to do the whole thing, like you
But let's
collect the
start
data.
with writing it. To writing it, how long did it take for you to write it?
Um, I'll say like a month and a half, 2 months. Once I had everything that I needed, like all my data and all of that, um, I was on a good little flow. But I was creating the paper as I was doing the experiment. So, but I would say like maybe 2 months, like um, to like finalize it or whatever. Yeah,
Okay, then altogether it took you 9 months.
about 9 months. Yeah, 9 months. Yeah, like a semester and some change. So,
Mm.
mhm,
That's really interesting. Wow. See,
yeah.
just to write one paper, right? Just one.
Right. But then also, at the time I was a student. Um so there was a lot of different factors, like, did I have transportation to get where I needed to go and all that kind of stuff. So it wouldn't necessarily take everybody like a good 9 months or so. And sometimes it could take more, based on like how long of a period do you want to kind of encapsulate in your research study. If it's a longitudinal study, then that might take years. So like you're collecting information over, an amount of years. Like, for example, like the COVID kids, like we won't understand the full development of their the impact of their schooling, like starting to school like this on like Zoom and stuff. We won't necessarily understand how much that impacted them, not having like physical contact with their teachers and all that, until maybe like some years from now. I'm sure somebody's doing like a longitudinal study on the effects of COVID and schooling. We won't understand all of that until that person um, has all the information that they need in order to like come to a conclusion. So yeah, it just all depends.
Okay. Wow. Okay. See, so our people can be able to understand how long it takes to do a research. And you just broke it down. All right.
Mhm.
So now let's look at the difference between Western psychology and uh Black psychology or Africana psychology, as we like to call it today. What's the difference between those two?
So, to simply state it, I think, is that Western psychology is primarily primarily revolved around, or the information that makes it what it is based on the Western Eurocentric European person. Um, like I said earlier, and Amos Wilson talks about it, there is a difference. There's biological differences between us and them. And so, um, we don't always, whatever the Western model is, we don't always fit into that. We can, because number one, we've been here and we've been around them for so long, and they've been the quote unquote dominant culture for so long. But we're not them. Like we're not, we're not a chocolate covered them. So African centered psychology focuses on us. So when we talk about African centered psychology, we go all the way back to, culturally our beginnings, or as far back as we want to go. But we're not dealing with ourselves as a, just a counterpart to the Western man or the white man. We are also considering our cultural beginnings. So African centered is just basically centered around the African individual, wherever they are in the diaspora. Of course, it would include, our Jamaican brethren, and of course, those on the continent, and ourselves here, and those in Brazil. So we're dealing with our cultural historical psychology, and then designing theories based on that.
Okay, wow. So, do you ever see yourself in the future being a part of the Association of Black Psychologists?
What, Tiffany? I, so I've had the little application on my desktop for like years. So I was
For
I've
years?
done, yeah, because I the only thing with them is that this is my gripe, because okay, to answer your question, yes. And I've done things with them. I've attended things that they've done before. The only thing is I want to, like, in order for me to be a part of something, I want to see that there's some benefit from me doing so. And I haven't seen enough benefit. Like, I've had professionals I'm sorry, I've had like professors who have been involved with them or part of them. And really just being a part of them is just applying for their certification, which, like I said, the application's been on my desktop for a long time. But until I see some benefit for myself or for my organization or what I do, then I don't know. Because I feel like they lean a lot on Western research. Um, I feel like they do. But then also, I don't know. I'm just kind of, I don't know. I don't know. There's other things that I want to do. But I respect them, and I respect those who have come. I have a lot of their resources. So, but just like being a part of them, I don't know.
Yeah, 'cause I have their book. It's a thick book with the name,
Yep,
yeah,
I
with
have
the
it too.
names of
Yep.
the people that was a part of the organization, the founders and
hmm
whatnot. Yeah, I have that book. But
Yeah.
wow, so you say you just have to see more benefits and you have to see if
I have to see more benefits for myself, because it can be a little pricey to be, because I don't know. Sometimes I feel like some of these organizations, in terms of like joining them, is so much like a sorority or like a fraternity and stuff, and I'm not into that. So, like, show me the benefit of me being there. Like, are you going to help me in some type of way, or is there like something that I'm gonna do, like, or is it just like having the badge next to my name? Like, I don't care about the badge. I just want to know, is the resources that I'm gonna put into being a part of your organization, is the $1,000 dues that I have to pay every whatever month. I don't think it's 1,000, but it's a heavy sum of money. Like, is that going to pay off in some way? You know what I'm saying? Because there's definitely dues that need to be paid. So, annual dues. So,
okay, okay, then wow. Well,
mhm.
I appreciate this. This is a healthy dialogue. This is a healthy conversation. And I really have learned so much. Now it's a lot. I'm gonna tell you, it's a load. It's a load. But
It is.
That's
It's
just
hard.
how, right? That's just how it is when you are actually in the field of studying psychology or any social science field. It's a
Mhm.
lot of things that goes into detail with this, so there's a lot of stuff that you have
Yeah.
to learn. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Especially when you deal with like, behavior, neurological
Mhm.
development and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was expected, but I'm grateful for that. Any closing?
No, I think that the conversation is very important. I think that even if she even misspoke, like, Chris said, Michelle, or or if that's what her doctor told her, I think it's a good dialogue for us to have in the Black community, because we don't talk about autism enough. I think that we talk about it more now because of social media. you
Hmm.
know and people with autism are on social media, and just the conversation. It's good to have the conversation. So if there's any other conversations that we need to have, I can help you with that. And yeah, and thank you for having me, and thank you for being patient with me. You know what I'm talking about, but yeah.
Well, thank
I
you, and
appreciate you.
thank you for coming on here and giving your professional point of view, because it was much
Absolutely.
needed, and I really appreciate that. So, I will reconnect with you next time. All right,
Okay,
all
cool.
right then. So you be
All
safe
right.
and you have a wonderful Saturday.
Thank you.
All right then, peace.
All right, peace.